Information here is something that looks like it's needed. I have not watched this video yet, so we'll be watching this together. Uh, I'd like to know the 10 most harmful foods. I'm always playing around with my diet, and I'd like to know, I'd like to improve that. So I'm gonna let him start and give us the info in regards to what we should not be eating or what we should stay away from.
Hello, health champions. Sometimes people keep eating the wrong foods because they just don't know any better. But other times, it's because what they are being told is actually wrong.
Or sometimes it just tastes good, and I think it's that simple.
So today, I want to go over the real reasons you want to avoid these 10 foods. So in no particular order, this is food number 1, canned soup. And here's a brand that shall remain anonymous. And what was interesting was where the source where I got this information, they said to avoid soup. But the only thing out of this list.
I haven't had canned soup in a while. I stopped this because I saw something. I did not know. I had no clue. You're thinking chicken noodle soup is good for when you're sick. I had no idea this had soy protein and cane sugar and modified food starch. Like all of this, I had no idea all this was there. Wheat flour. I had no idea. It's anyway. I'm gonna let him continue.
That they found objectable was salt. Now, I think there are a few other things. Salt is about the only
Several.
thing that I think is relatively safe on this list. But when they talk about something that's enriched, what does that mean? That should be a word that sounds off an alarm bell, because enriched means they took away a lot and put back a little. So it's like I take $1 from you and I give you a penny back, and now I have enriched you.
So you're enriched with less. Uh, I'm trying to figure out how they pick the wordsmith on spinning this information that they give us.
That's what it means. So enriched foods are processed and depleted foods. Next, we have wheat, which we'll go over more later, which is one of the most common allergens. There's virtually no one that tolerates wheat properly anymore. Monosodium glutamate is an excitotoxin. It's a neurotoxin that makes your brain think food tastes better than it does, and it kills brain cells, and it makes you eat more of certain foods than your body normally would. Cornstarch, nothing good about it. Modified cornstarch could mean just about anything. Cane sugar flavoring could mean anything. Yeast extract is often a pseudonym for monosodium glutamate or other synthetic artificial flavoring agents. Soy protein isolate means that they have processed. They start off with soy, which is not a great food in the first place, but then they process it harshly with solvents and acid to isolate these proteins. So not a great food, harshly processed. And then we have phosphate. And we'll cover this in a couple more places I'll show you. But phosphate is in the body, it works in balance with calcium. In your bone, you have 10 parts calcium to 4 parts phosphorus. And anytime that we get too much phosphorus, it's not a bad thing in itself. It's obviously essential, but when we add too much, we unbalance the calcium in the body and we actually deplete calcium from the bone. So processed foods containing a lot of phosphate are actually promoting bone loss and osteoporosis. So canned soup, it's more of an example for you to avoid. Whenever something has this list of ingredients, then you just know it's not a great food. So this carries over to hundreds of different items. Number 2 on the list is white bread. And there is little argument anymore that this is not a great food.
Yeah, I thought, especially in this day and time, this is obvious. I mean, anything that's basically processed like this is just of negative nutritional value.
First of all, it's hybridized. And that means they've genetically altered it. They've changed it to give.
GMO bread. What's not GMO? I well, I don't want to go with that video right now. That's another video. I'll stay on topic.
Higher yields, to be more resistant to weather. And they've also changed it so that it has higher levels of a specific kind of gluten that's extra sticky. That's how they can make this bread so super fluffy, which you can't do with really any other kind of grain. And that makes it chewy and fluffy, but most people have a really hard time tolerating that kind of gluten. That's why some people can eat ancient grains, but they can't eat this modern form of wheat. The wheat grain basically has three things in it. It has starch, bran, and germ. And the starch is another form of sugar, bran is the fiber, and germ is where the vitamins and minerals, that's where the fat-soluble vitamins are. But when they process it, in order to turn it into this white fluffy thing, they remove the fiber and they remove all the nutrients. And this is the main reason why the mainstream looks down upon this bread. That's why they don't recommend it, because they say it's empty calories. And also to some degree they say that it has a very high glycemic index of 75, give or take a couple, which is actually higher than table sugar. So it will raise your blood sugar tremendously fast. It's basically just another form of sugar. It will start breaking down into glucose within seconds of being in your mouth, and then it goes very quickly to raise your blood sugar within minutes. Wheat also contains something called wheat agglutinin, which is a lectin. And people can have different degrees of sensitivities to lectins. For some people, it's a life-changing problem, and for some, it's barely noticeable. But what this does is it damages the surface of certain structures, and one is the gut lining. So by damaging the inside of the gut lining, it promotes gut irritation and leaky gut and food sensitivities. By irritating and damaging the inside of blood vessels, called the intima, it promotes cardiovascular disease and inflammation in your cardiovascular and your circulatory system. Another problem with wheat is that most of it is produced with something called glyphosate, which is a probable carcinogen and has been banned in many countries around the world. But then we have something really, really interesting, that everyone agrees that this is junk food, but for some reason, this closely related thing called wheat bread is promoted as a health food.
Yes, this is what I would like to know. The wheats, the rye, there's all kind of bread. Like, is all bread bad? Because I like bread, and I know a lot of us like bread. But anyway, I'm just curious. It just crossed my mind to see if there's a difference. I hope there's a difference here.
Staple, as necessary even. And when we look at the big long list of characteristics, they're virtually identical. The only reason is that in whole grain bread, they keep the bran and the germ, which of course I'm in favor of. You shouldn't remove certain beneficial portions. And the other difference is that the glycemic index is 75 versus 74. So in other words, virtually exactly the same. Everything else about these are identical.
This is disappointing. This is disappointing because, you sometimes, I don't eat bread much, but there are times, like today is one, where, I make these gourmet sandwiches. Again, it's not something I eat all the time, maybe once every few months or so, but I'm disappointed. Anyway.
Mainstream, the only thing they object to is that they remove a little bit of the nutrients, which again is a bad thing, but they're missing the big picture that people are reacting, and this is causing inflammation at so many different levels. So I would definitely avoid this, but I would also avoid that as well. Number 3 on the list is canned tuna, and it's not just...
No! There goes my tuna sandwiches. Not that I eat those a lot these days, but I used to eat them a lot. But this is just getting more depressing. Like, okay, I was okay with the bread, and what was number one? I can't even remember. I'm not gonna rewind. I was okay with whatever it was because, oh, the chicken soup. Yeah, I don't eat chicken soup, but now this is starting to hurt.
Canned tuna, but any kind of tuna really. It's convenient, it's filling, it's tasty, but it has something called mercury. Tuna is a large fish, it's a predator.
That what I said. Yeah, it's beginning to hurt, but it makes sense. It makes sense. It's disappointing, but it is what it is. No canned tuna, but I guess you could replace that with real tuna or salmon.
So when it eats the smaller
Salmon from the river. I'm gonna stop interrupting now.
creatures of the ocean, it concentrates all the toxins in those smaller creatures. And there was a study, and as a result of that study, they recommended that pregnant women should avoid tuna altogether because mercury is such a potent neurotoxin that it prevents the proper formation of the baby's brain and nervous system. But I think we also want to understand that if it has that effect on the pregnant woman and the fetus, then it's something that we ought to be cautious with. So I'm not saying you need to avoid it 100%, but don't treat it as a staple. Don't eat it all the time. I'd say maybe every couple of weeks or once a month or something, then you have a little tuna. Number 4 is diet soda. And the biggest questions people have.
Oh, this is obvious. I mean, this is obvious. I had a funny story. There was a guy. Again, I was in school, and he was a really big guy, and he used to eat like these small tray dinners from the grocery store, and he'd be like drinking the Diet Coke, and I guess he'd be like loading up on Diet Cokes. It was kind of funny because he was big, so it was like, okay, the Diet Coke is not going to shrink you, but you can't just walk up to somebody and say that. But I thought it was funny.
All the time is it compatible with keto? Is it all right? Does it spike insulin? Will it break a fast? And the answer is that it works for keto. It doesn't spike insulin, at least not much in most people. It doesn't really break a fast. But those are irrelevant questions because this is not food. Any more than you would eat paint chips with lead in them, you do not want to touch this stuff. Aspartame is one of the more popular artificial sweeteners, and it breaks down into formaldehyde, which is embalming fluid, and ethanol, that's wood alcohol, the stuff that makes you go blind. And the list
Whoa.
of complaints about aspartame is endless, but they have a hard time pinning anything specific on it, so it's still out there. The other popular artificial sweetener is called sucralose, also known as Splenda. And when they marketed this and promoted it, they had learned that people didn't like artificial things. So they spent a lot of time and energy promoting sucralose as something natural. They said it's as natural as carbohydrate and sea salt because sodium chloride is sea salt and carbon is in every living thing. But what they lied about, what they implied that is not true, is that these things go together, and they don't. In sucralose, they force them together into a covalent bond, which is a strong bond. And these two things, when
For those of you who took chemistry, do you remember what a covalent bond is? I don't remember. I remember the term in chemistry. I struggled in chemistry, but just FYI.
and you put them together in that kind of bond, they become pesticides. And that's how they discovered sucralose, is that they were trying to develop a pesticide when they found that it tasted sweet. So things like DDT and aldrin and dieldrin, and the list goes on and on. This is just a partial list. What do these things have in common? They are chlorocarbons, or also known as organochlorides, and they have been proven to be so toxic that they were banned years or decades ago. But they're so pervasive in the environment that even 50, 60 years after the ban, they are still detectable. Number 5 on the list is potato chips. And the most common objection that you hear is that they're high in salt and high in fat.
Of course, this is pretty obvious, but I'm gonna just kind of stop right here. I mean, it's high fat, high salt. I guess you read the back and you can see saturated fat, that kind of even the, I guess, low fat food is basically processed. Anything processed is just bad. So I guess this is, most of us I guess kind of knew this, but it's good to see the actual details behind it and the ingredients behind it and the reasons why. I wasn't sure about chicken soup though. I didn't know because I was kind of indifferent about it because I never really, it wasn't on my radar. But now that it is, I'm like, I guess a lot of things in the can are just not the best for us. But I'm going to end right here, and please feel free to share your opinion, and please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.